Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge, trying to get my camera angle good. If you're watching me on YouTube, I apologize in advance, not looking my best today. Before we start, I'm going to actually talk, if you are watching me on YouTube, I'm going to start by talking about my glasses. These are Benny's eyewear. And if you go to bennyseyewear.com and you use my code Judging10, you can get 10% off the pair right now. And I think Carolyn actually just complimented me before we started recording. I really think these glasses are cute and I've been getting a lot of compliments on them. So I'll say that. So thank you, Benny's, for sending me these. What I would like to talk about before I introduce my guest today, and I'm going to actually bring her in right away because she is a relationship expert and a therapist. And before we started recording, we are both passionate about the same thing, which is my platform, and why I started this podcast over 4 years ago was suicide prevention. That's my passion, and mental health. And the fact that we can't get things covered. And I'm going to bring up this latest story of this United Healthcare CEO, who was sadly killed. And by no means am I saying what happened to him was okay. But what has happened is this has brought up the conversation of what is going on with our healthcare in our country, number one. And why can't we get mental health covered? Like, part of our issue with the homeless crisis and the drug addiction and the alcohol abuse, it all stems from our mental health crisis. I don't know how many times I have to say this. So Carolyn, before I introduce you, I would love to bring you in on my intro if you're comfortable talking about that.
Sure thing. I agree wholeheartedly. I have a number of clients who are spending their own money, spending into their savings, spending themselves into debt to get mental health coverage no one chooses to have mental health issues. No one chooses to have a chronic mental health condition, and to have to bankrupt yourself to get healing, to get recovery is unconscionable. So it is, sometimes I'm a little bit speechless by the state of things in our country and the state of healthcare and mental health care. It's horrifying to me.
Well, I think too, like for doctors and therapists, and they're just trying to get things. I'm a huge advocate of therapy. I say it all the time. It saved my life. I think it's important to have our kids in therapy, but the problem is that it can bankrupt people. Even people, like I said, you never know. At some point in your life, you're probably going to go need to talk to a therapist, whether it be like losing someone. We're all going to lose people. Job loss, like addiction. There's so many reasons why people need to go speak to a therapist. Marriage troubles, you never know. And so the fact that it's so expensive, and then to bring up this kid that ended up killing the CEO, I've done my reading up on this, and he obviously is mentally ill. Like, I guess what ended up happening was he grew up in a really affluent family in Baltimore, and he was diagnosed with spondylolisthesis, which I actually have as well. And mine is manageable with chiropractic care. But I guess his was triggered by an accident, and he had to have surgery, and it's just unbearably painful. So if people are in that kind of pain, he just couldn't get answers, and the insurance companies aren't covering things. And I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on that? And then I promise I'm going to introduce you.
My thoughts on not providing coverage, or my thoughts on a kid who is in chronic, persistent pain engaging in violence?
I think a little bit of both. Like, clearly this is a kid that was valedictorian of his high school. He went to a very exclusive boys' school in Baltimore. Then he went to Penn State. It seems to me like they say he came from this great family, and then he started to just unravel as his health started to decline, and he couldn't get things covered. And from what I understand, this is happening all the time. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
when your physical body is in pain, then
Hmm.
our brains are part of that. They start to decline as
Yep.
well. So that's
Yeah.
really my
Yeah.
question, what your thoughts are on
Yeah,
that.
when you're in physical pain, and I've seen couples, I've had couples come
Mhm.
into me to do therapy and coaching who have had a dental procedure, who have chronic migraines in physical pain, and physical pain takes up so much of our mental resources.
Mhm.
In some cases, when we're in really severe pain, we go into fight or flight because the brain feels under attack. And so it's limiting our capacity to access the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for analysis and, the really sophisticated thought. We don't have access to it because we're just trying to survive what feels like an attack on our system.
Mhm.
And to be too long in that state, to have that going all the time, you've got cortisol, you've got the stress hormone in your system too much. It causes damage to our immune system. It causes damage to our emotional system. All kinds of things take off. There's a cascade of effects, as well as the trauma, the emotional trauma of surgery and being in the physical health system and the all of that sort of stuff and whatever may have happened. I haven't done as much reading on this individual, but whether he lost access to sports and that
Mhm.
was something that he was engaged in. There's lots of loss that takes place, and so there's hit after hit after hit to this person. And then we don't know, or I don't know, the culture he grew up in, where maybe not, it's permissible to talk about feelings, whether it's, family culture or ethnic culture or whatever, or school culture, whether it's okay to acknowledge vulnerability, sadness, fear, pain of any kind. And if he didn't have outlets to express anger, frustration, hurt, fear, he's bottling it up and bottling it up and bottling it up. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like everything else. The majority of these
Mm-hmm.
shootings that happen in our country are all stemming from something that could have started. You never know why, but this is a problem. I
Mm-hmm.
will never stop talking about it or shut up. So if you're listening and you want me to, wrong podcast. We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
Everyone, I love to keep everyone always sitting in suspense, because I do this all the time where I sit there for a good solid almost 10 minutes with an intro with a guest, and then I finally introduce them. I'm so honored to have Carolyn Sharp on the podcast. She has a new book coming out called Fire It Up. She is a therapist, a coach, and a relationship expert. Carolyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Meghan. I'm so happy to be here.
So I want to start. I love having therapists on, and relationship experts in particular, because a relationship, we all have relationships in life, right? Either husband,
Yep.
wife, friendships, relationships, colleagues, everything. So I think it's important to have your say. I have different topics I'm going to bring up today, but I would love to get your views on a whole slew of them. And again, my audience knows this. I love talking about myself. I think that's why I do this podcast. So I might bring in some of my own stuff and we can unpack that, because I have a few questions for you.
Awesome.
Let's start with you, though. Tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Okay. I grew up outside New York City, in the suburbs of New York City. My dad was a banker and took the train into the city, and my mom was home with us. Grew up on a farm, so in this idyllic place, an hour outside the city. from a upper middle class or an upwardly mobile family. So we didn't want for anything. And I had two parents that loved me, loved my siblings, loved each other a lot. But there was my mother and her parents had alcoholism. So she was an active alcoholic until I was, I think, 13, and also had mental health issues. From a culture and a time when you don't talk about emotions, you don't talk about that sort of stuff, and so it wasn't the idyllic childhood that it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
I came along 5 and 7 years after my siblings did, and so they were already in their prime social time with their own friends and their own activities. By the time I was 5, they were 10 and 12, and they were off and busy, and I was this annoying little sister, still an annoying little sister. And my parents were busy and dealing with their own stuff. And so I didn't have much companionship. And in fact, I grew up on a farm. My cousins were across the farm from us, and my siblings were their age. And so they were a little pack of people with their friends. And so I was sort of the object of ridicule because I was that annoying youngest family member. And so I was very lonely. Both of my siblings left for boarding school when I was 10. I was by myself with she was really in the grips of her alcoholism from 10 until she stopped at 13. And it was terrible. I'd come home and she would be passed out on the kitchen floor, and it would be, scary and lonely and all of that. So I bring all of that up not to blame anyone, because I don't really believe in that, because my parents loved me. They loved each other. They were doing the best with what tools they'd been given. But it shaped who I am and how I am. And that is one of the reasons that I ended up becoming a therapist, because I understood at the young age that this wasn't what was supposed to be. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. It wasn't really right that I was being teased all the time, that I didn't have anyone to play with, that my parents couldn't really help me with that. And so I knew what I needed, and I knew what other kids needed. And so I sort of set about, that was always sort of my vision for myself, was to become a therapist, to provide for children what they needed. And then over time, after being a child therapist and a family therapist for years, I moved into couples therapy and relationship therapy, because I saw that one of the most powerful ways I could help children was by helping their parents have healthier relationships, their caregivers have healthier relationships with each other.
Okay.
So,
I love everything you said, not the horrible things, but I love why you got into this. I'm always struck by people that do this for a living, because so many people that I interview have a past. They have a reason behind it, right? I would say 90%.
I think the statistic is like 97% of helping professionals come from dysfunctional backgrounds.
Yeah.
I think that's the statistic. Don't quote me on that, because I don't know.
I would say that you're very close, because that's why I do what I do. I'm not a therapist, but I think that when you come from a past of, I find the most fascinating people in life are people that have a past and didn't have it easy, because they know what it's like to struggle. They know what it's like to have pain. I think aces, obviously you were an ace, I'm an ace. By the way, for my listeners, that's adverse childhood experiences. I talk about it a lot on the podcast. Many children that grow up in abusive situations with alcoholic parents or loss, they define it as ace. And they bring that with you into your adulthood, which I have. And I've done a lot of therapy, but we all have work to do. We're all evolving. What I have in common with you is I have two sisters that are 5 and 7 years older than me. So I know what that feels like. I also have a younger brother, but just the being kind of feeling like, you're different, you're not accepted. I was never an athlete. Like my two older sisters were really book smart and athletes, and I was a dancer, and they just I never felt accepted. So I understand how that feels. And then the piece of it of how painful the being a child of an alcoholic is. It's very, very hard. But thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important for listeners to know why people do what they do. And whenever people come on, especially doctors or therapists, and they share why they do it, I think it's even more meaningful for my listeners and for me. So I would love to talk about relationships and why you wrote your book. But when you said something, it struck me that you were dealt with marriage and family and children in the beginning. And then the piece of it that is so important that I'm dealing with in my own life, and my listeners know because I talk about it, is parenting a teen girl, which I am. I have two daughters. One's 14, one's 10. I don't know what is I do know what's happening to my 14-year-old. It's called torture and hell. And you don't know this.
AKA adolescence.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what in God's name is happening? Lots of tears.
Where did my sweet girl
go? No,
it's
so true. And and I talk about it on the podcast, and I've told her, I'm open with her that she doesn't love it. So I try to limit it now, but more so than like the parenting of the teen and the two girls that are my payback for me being not well behaved at that age, is co-parenting, and the relationship between my husband and I. And I'm not trying to turn this into a therapy session, but while I have you here, we are fighting more than we fought in quite a while. We always bicker, but the fighting, because we can't seem to get on the same page of let's take the phone. Then he gets home from work and she wants to manipulate. And then it makes me angry and resentful. And then, like, I'm telling you all of this because also, like, adding on to that, if we go into therapy as a couple, and then I have her in therapy, like, hello, I'm spending a mortgage, So I would love for you to touch on that if you're comfortable.
Absolutely. For sure. I mean, this isn't therapy because we're on the radio. And that wouldn't be safe for anybody. Yeah. But I'm happy to go into that because it's such a common struggle. And from a relationship perspective, and this is a study that's a couple of decades old, I think, but they studied distressed newborns. And what calmed the distressed newborn fastest and most powerfully was when the two parents made eye contact with one another. That regulated the newborn. And I share that experience. Your 14-year-old is obviously not a newborn, but what she needs from you is for the two of you to be strong and connected. You need to be creating this container for all of the explosions that are going on in her body and in her world, because everything is changing. She's going through a brain upgrade. She's going through hormones. Her whole developmental tasks are changing. And she doesn't know what to do. Her life is blowing up around her. And you're also going through the loss of your little baby as she turns into a mini, she's trying on adult, or she's moving toward adulthood. You're dealing with that. You're dealing with fear of what the hell is happening. Is she headed to jail? Is she headed to a nervous breakdown? What am I losing her? All of that stuff. Rage, because she's probably, if she's anything like my daughter was in that tumultuous period, my daughter just turned 20 in July. So
everybody says it gets better.
Years.
It gets better.
It does. It does.
Okay.
It does.
Okay.
But in that period, it's scary. But my daughter was also being immensely hurtful to me.
Me too.
She was saying the most hateful things to me. Sweetie, it's okay. I forgive you. It's all fine if she's listening to this podcast. Because she's still apologizing for things she said and did to me back in the day, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So they really do come all the way through, full circle back to the sweet. Anyway, but you're feeling all of these feelings, And what happens in co-parenting, as well as managing life, as in all of the things in relationship, we tend to just focus on the content. And you may know this, but for our listeners that don't, there's two levels of communication. There's content and there's process. Content is the facts, the data, the logistics. What are we going to do about our daughter? Like, do we ground her? Do we not? Do we take her phone? Do we not? That's the content, but the process is the meaning, the feelings, the emotion underneath that topic area, that content area. So I'm scared. I'm lonely. I miss my girl. I don't know what to do. I'm feeling incompetent. I'm lost. Help me. I don't feel supported, whatever it is. And couples get stuck. Co-parents get stuck in the what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And then they fight about that versus, all right, let's just take a minute and be there for each other of how terrible this is right now, that she's so angry all the time and she won't sit at the table with us without being disgusted that we're here. And then she's slamming, can we just be there for each other first before we launch into what are we going to do? And then to move from there to tell me about why you want to ground her. Tell me about what that feels like, what is behind that, why that's important to you, why you think that's a good idea, to understand each other and where you're coming from rather than just arguing about whether or not to do it. And this is one of the pieces that I think is sort of an epidemic. We just make assumptions about each other based on the first answer, based on who they voted for, based on what they think about X, Y, or Z, versus tell me about why that's important to you. And really listening with curiosity rather than judgment of you voted for this person. That means you're X versus, your faith is so critically important to you. It is your whole being. And that's why it feels so powerfully important for you to vote for X, or, you have a daughter that is trans or whatever, and you're scared that they're going to die. That's why you're voting for that person, to really listen and try to have interest in this person as a person rather than just their vote or their decision about grounding or not grounding a person. So I just meandered all around.
No, Carolyn, like you've had me at hello since I met you. But seriously, like I love that you said the judgment piece because it's huge. And thank you for bringing that up with politics too, because that is a good thing to talk about. Like I am so judgmental right now. And my listeners know I try to limit politics because it's too depressing for me. But I'm having a hard time and not judging and not understanding. And I think it is important to take a step back and understand and ask the questions, or maybe not ask the questions, but just do it in a way where, like, I tend to yell. As a parent, I grew up, I'm Irish and Italian. I yell all the time. And even today on the way to school, there was a lot of yelling. And when she got out of the car, a lot of crying lately. But I hope that Ronald, my husband, is listening to this. Ron, I call him Ronald, but only when he's in trouble. Because this is huge. It's really, really important about the piece about the relationship between the husband and the wife and the child and the partner and all of that. Okay. So that's my opening question for you. But what I want to know is why you decided to write the book, Fire It Up.
Well, I was a full-time therapist up until 2020 when COVID came along, shut Seattle right the fuck down. We were the first state to go into full lockdown because if you remember, COVID came into the United States mainly into
that nursing home.
Into that nursing home. We shut down and closed up shop everywhere March 20th. And so I went from being full-time in person to full-time online without any idea how to do that. And I was known in Seattle and a little bit beyond Seattle for working with the most fucked up couples, not fucked up couples, but fucked up situations that couples get themselves into, multiple affairs, addiction, a Lifetime movie of the week type situations that you can't even really believe are real. I would help those couples come back. In COVID, those couples being in lockdown together was just an epic disaster. And so I wasn't breaking them up, but they were breaking up session after session. And so I would come home, Jeff would ask me how many couples broke up today, and it would be multiple. And it was more than I could really do, as well as being, 8 hours online with people in distress. And so I burned out of doing that full time. And so, but I've only ever been a helping professional. I've only ever been a therapist. And I was like, all right, what else can I do? And so I became obsessed with the idea of preventing those sorts of situations. And so I created a coaching program called the Fired Up Marriage Accelerator that is a 12-lesson online and in person sort of hybrid thing to teach people what they need to know to build a healthy relationship at any stage of their relationship.
Okay, I love that. That's amazing. And also what you said though about the COVID thing is, I don't know how people lived through COVID if they were already in like cheating, like that, going through all of, how did people do that?
It was such a pressure cooker. And I remember someone early in the pandemic saying to me, there are going to be so many COVID babies. I said, no, there are not, because being 24/7 locked in a home where you can't go to the bar, you can't go to the coffee shop, you can't go to restaurants, you can't go to bowling, you can't do any of the things you normally do to blow off steam, you can't go to the gym, you can't do anything. Without that, just being locked in together 24/7, not so romantic, not so sexy. Couples are not going to be having gobs of sex just because they have the time to do it, because they don't want to see their partner. Being together 24/7 it's not good for anybody's relationship, really. There's some exceptions, obviously, but by and large, that's not good for anybody. And then you add in dynamics where communication is terrible. There's high conflict. Someone has done something to somebody else. There's been cheating or infidelity in another way, like financial infidelity, all kinds of stuff. Someone's lost their job to COVID or otherwise. So you have financial pressures. I mean, it's just a disaster. And the dynamics present to couples, attachment differences, all that sort of stuff get intensified. And the cracks that they were sort of like able to manage, like, all right, we're healing our way through this. We want to work it out. All right, now we're together 24/7 with no escape, no release valve. It was just a disaster. And there was also the added thing, I think, where people were like, life is too short. I'm not willing. I'm not interested anymore in doing this work with you. And so, it was relationship after relationship.
What is the statistic on the breakup of post-COVID?
I don't know. I mean, it's still unfolding.
Yeah.
I've said so many times, I can't wait for the COVID research to come out I think our brains have changed as a result of COVID because of how much we're online now that we didn't used to be.
Yeah.
The change from in-person social engagement to, people getting their social engagement from Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and, meetups that are online. All of that, the lack of, people not being able to talk on the phone or have a conversation or have eye contact because they're used to just being on video. I'm so fascinated for the research, not to mention the research for children that went through kindergarten, whose kindergarten year was online, or, my kids went through high school.
Kindergarten, my youngest, and my fifth grader. That's when it all took a turn. And there's an author that I had on, I think it's Dr. Mark Williams, and forgive me if I'm messing this up because my brain is too tiny to remember. Dr. Mark Williams wrote a book about the human connection, and it's a great book. And it's all about this stuff, and how important it is post-COVID to like put our phones down and talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And I love that bring that up because it is so true that in COVID or in general, if you're with your partner too much, like I need breaks. I mean, my husband needs freaking breaks. I drive him nuts. And at the time, I'm surprised he was with me during that period that I told you about in the beginning where I was like drooling in a corner before we recorded in 2020, because that was when my breakdown was, on top of that being COVID. And so I don't think I tell him enough how appreciative I am, because he just took control during that time. And he's a great dad and a great husband, but it is hard. People aren't supposed to be together that much. Okay. So going back to you and
and if you get one thing out of this podcast, let it be the thing that you hang up from this podcast. Call him and tell him, I don't tell you enough how much I appreciate you. And to all your listeners, let that be the one thing. Go tell your partner how much you appreciate them.
I totally agree with you. He and I fight like cats and dogs, but at the end of the day, he's probably thinks I'm so annoying, and I know he does actually, but I tell him every day how much I love him when he goes to work. And I think that I'm 24 years into my relationship and 16 years married, and he's my best friend. Like, this makes me emotional because he saved me. So while you're saying all of that, it's so important, and I really am lucky. Going back to you though, and like couples in general, and again, like I don't have a perfect marriage, so today is an emotional day.
Nobody does.
I think that's so huge that we have to remind our spouses or our partners how much they mean to us, because if we don't, it's just like people are just, I mean, my husband works all day, works his butt off, comes home, dealing with the trauma of my teen daughter and, kids and all that stuff. So I love that you brought that up. So
it also counteracts the negativity bias in our brain, which, if you don't know what that is, or your readers don't, our brain holds on to negative information with 10 times. This is maybe the old amount, 10 times the power that it holds on to positive information. So if we're told you're bad at math one time, it takes 10 times being told you're good at math to undo that single occasion. So when you and your partner have a negative interaction where you say you're annoying, which, by the way, all humans are annoying. We're all annoying. Yeah. Humans as a species are just a fucking disaster. And is there a better time in history to see evidence of that? So we're all annoying. There's, but you're his annoying and he's your annoying. As my mentor and teacher, Stan Atkins, likes to say, in marriage vows, it should be, I take you to be my pain in the ass, because that's really a powerfully honest assessment of marriage. But taking the time to be grateful counteracts that negativity bias. Powerfully putting in, I know I've gotten on your nerves. I know I've told you take out the trash wrong, or you clean the counter wrong, or whatever it is, but I want you to know how much I appreciate you is powerful and important. And it's like a superpower, supercharged to our relationship to express gratitude.
I want to ask you about the relationship, the piece of it where you go on these retreats. So you said that it's good for couples at any stage of their relationship. So, I mean, I think, like, looking back, is it good for a couple that's newly meeting each other, or newly engaged, or newly married? Like, what do you say? What do you tell people about that piece of it?
Absolutely. I just got back. I took a group of couples to Tuscany for a week.
Oh, thanks for calling. Whatever.
Hey, I already booked the villa for 2025.
Okay,
so
well,
come
we
back
might be coming. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I would love that. We'd have so much fun. We'd have so much fun. It was like a fucking dream. Yeah. And there was a couple that were celebrating, I think, their 41st wedding anniversary, and then a couple that was celebrating 10 years, I think, married. And so there is no wrong phase. And there was a couple that wanted to join that are together a year, and they couldn't because of timing and all that sort of stuff. But it would have been fantastic to have them, because there's no wrong point to invest time and invest health and intention into your relationship. There are different things that each couple needs to focus on depending on where they are and what their struggles are, but there are also universal things of what is hard. I mean, it is hard sharing a life with somebody, navigating the bills, the laundry, the chores, all of that sort of stuff. Kids, if a couple chooses to have kids, it's hard to navigate all of that. Intimacy, sex, spark, all of that sort of stuff doesn't take care of itself. You have to put work into that to keep it going. And there's not a lot that's talked about related to that. There's more now than there used to be, but couples still think, well, if it's meant to be, if we're really in love, it just takes care of itself. And that's utter bullshit. You have to work at it. You have to invest time and energy into creating safety, to be honest in that area, to recognize, yeah, I don't really like it when you do that thing that you do. That's not my favorite, or it doesn't turn me on when you say that or do that. You have to have safety in your relationship to talk about that. And most couples don't. A few do, but most don't, because we have, the United States is started its roots are puritanical. So we got a lot of garbage about sexuality and what's healthy. So there are universal themes, which is why I wrote Fire It Up, because there are universal issues that every couple contends with. And so any couple could benefit from a retreat or from a workshop or from everything, because we tend to take our relationship for granted, to just put it on autopilot. Okay, we're married, we're committed. We can just leave that alone, let that go. And now we can focus on the kids or the job or the house or whatever. And it's false. You have to work at your relationship to keep it healthy. So
I think
any couple, any stage.
I love that. And I think it's interesting because I'm sitting here thinking how, if I could go back in time, right? We could all have that, could go back and tell our younger selves things about getting married. You go into a marriage, and I wanted kids. My husband was like, we obviously have kids, but you don't understand when you're getting married, like the challenges that you're going to go through in life as we age. And so something I would love to hear from you is the little thing called gray divorce, because so many women, especially, we change as we age. And I talk a lot about aging and menopause and all of those things. And so there's a common thing that I hear about called gray divorce, how as couples age, they change. I'm a completely different person at this age than I was in my 20s when I met my husband. And, I think I'm smarter, or maybe, I don't know, I'm on the fence, but yeah, I am smarter. But things that I loved back then, I don't love now. Same for him. And so I think the sexual piece of it is something we really were, that's important. And I think a lot of times I've heard that as people get older, they lose that sexual piece of it. So it's something you always have to work at. And the intimacy part, but I would love to get your thoughts on that piece of it. Cause I think it's a cyclical thing, where you're young, you meet, you're in love, you're passionate. And then you go into these different stages of life. And then eventually, we're going into the stage of life, which is aging. And I would love to be with him for the rest of my life. And hopefully he feels the same way. But it's how do we age together? How do we grow together and stay together? So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I mean, people think that I am anti-divorce, and that my mission is to save all marriages and keep all marriages together. And that isn't, because I want all people to be true to themselves and have the life that they want. So, and I was just talking yesterday to a friend who is making the painful decision that he doesn't want to be in his marriage anymore. And that's okay. If the marriage isn't working for you and you don't want to be in the marriage, that's the one thing I can't fix or change for anybody. I can fix, or I can help a couple fix, because it's them that's really going to do the work. Any situation short of violence, I can help them fix anything. Infidelity, craziness, whatever. And I mean craziness in terms of crazy situations. I'm not lightning mental health issues, but anything can be fixed as long as both people want the problem to be fixed and are willing to do the work. So you can, I had a couple come into me and do the coaching program who had been married 35 years, very different people, and they had grown far apart. Like there was the Grand Canyon between them in terms of distance and separation. I had them do like the first couple of exercises. And by the third session in my office, they're like giggling and holding hands and being so sweet. And I was blown away because I thought it was going to take a lot more than that, but just making the commitment to, we're going to do what it takes to bring back our love for each other. They were able to bring it back with, they had to put effort in. So I don't want to minimize that. So to do that, you have to decide you want it. And then you have to sit down and be willing to have the honest conversation about what you want and what it's going to take to get there. And one of the first things I have couples do, and I had them do this in Tuscany, was redefining what's our foundation? What is our relationship for? What are we doing this for? Because why we got married 30, 40, 50 years ago doesn't stick anymore. It's not the same. And maybe many, many couples didn't do this definition of what's our purpose? Why are we together in the beginning, let alone now, but redefining what's our relationship for? Because in our 50s, in our 60s, it's not the same as it was when we were in our 20s. Then it's just like tear clothes off and just have fun and whatever. And now we're too tired for all of that, or, we want a little bit more quiet, or we want to travel, or we want to, take on a second career or retire, whatever it is. What is our relationship about? And so redefining that, coming to understanding of how we can move into this next period of our lives together, and not holding back that, well, you need to keep doing the things you're doing. It doesn't apply anymore. We both have to allow the evolution and the changes, some of which we may grieve. Some couples stop having sex because the spark is gone. Some couples stop having sex because they can't physically do it. And, there are lots of reasons. Their sexual orientation changes, whatever it is. You don't necessarily have to be, at each other, tearing each other's clothes off to have a successful romantic relationship. You get to define as a couple what works for the two of you, but you have to be honest about that, create the space, and be clear about what is the purpose of the relationship. And from there, then you decide, all right, what do we need to do to bring this to life? This relationship where it used to be adventure was our purpose. And now it's, fulfillment. It's, peace. It's, travel, whatever it is. What do we need to do to make our relationship support that purpose?
Do you feel like the intimacy piece of it, like you just kind of touched on, it doesn't have to obviously be sex, but it has to be like friendship? Like, do you feel like I like you, you're my friend first and foremost? Like, I think for me, like that's huge. I know like trust is my biggest thing. When you just talked about the piece of not like the cheating, and I know, like, I say this because who knows, like I don't know I would never know 100%, but I don't think my husband's ever cheated. And if you're listening, Ron, listen to this. But like, I don't think I personally could ever come back from something like that. And I don't know how people do.
I think it is an incredibly courageous and strong thing to come back from that. It takes a lot of work to heal the trauma of betrayal.
Yeah.
I don't believe I have the emotional makeup to do that because my, trauma and my emotional injuries are about not feeling chosen, not feeling wanted, not feeling like I fit in. I think that the emotional trauma of having my husband choose somebody else to do, a betrayal with, I don't think I have the constitution to recover from it. And I have identified that to him that, like,
I think we both have that.
If you cheated, I think if you cheated, I don't think I could get over it. I admire people that do. I also, I don't have the constitution where I could do polyamory. I admire, and that was another thing that I became sort of known for, is working well with couples who pursue polyamory. I admire it. I think it's incredible because you have an expansive heart that has room to do the intricacy with more than one person. For me, it's like I could barely handle the one person that I am focused on. I couldn't really handle it. And again, it would exacerbate my sense of not feeling good enough to have you focus, to have Jeff focus his attention somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I admire people that do. So, again, there's no shame in how you define your relationship and what trust is for you and for Ron. Trust is an area that is often discussed or misidentified because people think trust should just be there. Trust exists. Trust develops because of breaking of trust. It's not just like I trust you without question. Something has to happen, and we have to see that I trust you to take care of me. I trust you to be honest with me because there are areas where maybe you struggle with that and then you come forward. All right, that shows me I can trust you. I trust you to honor my feelings because sometimes you don't, but then you recognize that you didn't and you heal that. So deep trust comes from mistakes being made. And I'm not talking about betrayals, but I'm talking about honesty. I'm talking about emotional safety, all of the areas that are important for you, important for me, for my couples. It comes as a result of struggle. And that's where real strength in relationship comes from, is struggle. I mean, you know this from living your life. We don't grow from comfort as humans. We grow from discomfort. We grow from failure. We grow from mistakes. The same is true for couples. Mistakes aren't the problems in relationship. It's the absence of repair that causes the problems, that causes the breach of trust. Not coming forward and saying, I fucked that up, I'm really sorry. That's what creates strength in the relationship. Pretending like I didn't do that thing, or it's not that big of a deal, or blaming you because I got mad. That's where we have problems.
Do you
that was more words than you
No,
wanted.
I love everything you've said. I mean, this is like my favorite. I love talking about this. I think it's huge. I think relationships in general, and something you touched on that's interesting is the background and the trauma of childhood. I bet due to both of us having that, we probably feel the same way, but yet somebody could come in and be like, oh, I had a totally healthy childhood, like nothing ever went wrong. So I'm totally open to being in this polyamorous relationship where I'm like, hell no, get up. Like that would never, ever happen in my life. But I'm wondering, so going back to the book, so I understand why you wrote the book and some of the things, but I would love to know like some key takeaways for my listeners on why, because I think this conversation that we've had today is so huge and I love it. I could talk to you for hours, but I would love to know why somebody would want to go out and get fired up.
So the full title's Fired Up: 4 Secrets to Reigniting Intimacy and Joy, if they want the full title. And
I'm sorry,
the
I
4
left that out,
secrets
by the way.
are,
Go ahead.
No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. Fired Up is great. And that's the big title on the cover. So totally fine. I'm just adding that in so that they know. And the 4 secrets, it's called Fired Up because it is modeled on the idea that, and this is my nerdy brain, that to make a fire, you need 3 ingredients. You need oxygen, ignition, and fuel. And our relationship needs those same 3 things. It also needs to be built on a solid foundation. And so the whole book is about how you can build more health back into your relationship. You can increase what you already have. You can prevent problems from developing. You can recover from a period of staleness or, the spark going completely out with these 4 things. And the foundation is about building that purpose. Why is our relationship? Why are we together? What is our relationship for? The agreements that uphold that purpose. So, we agree to be monogamous. We agree to be honest with each other. We agree to take care of each other when we're feeling scared. Whatever your agreements are that are meaningful to the two of you, and then the values of your relationship. We value, that sort of inform all of that, and that allows us to have that road that we're traveling on, so that when shit gets hard, we know what we're supposed to come back to. It's, why do we go to the gym? Because we have a goal in the future, or because we want something out of it. Or why do we go to work? We go to work because it provides meaning to us, or whatever. We have to have a goal or a reason for doing the hard things that we do, or we won't do them. And so the foundation is that container that holds all of it. Oxygen is the acceptance of each other, because couples by and large try to change each other, and they spend so much time and so much frustration banging their heads against the wall, trying to get their partner to think differently, to feel differently, to behave differently. And it doesn't work. The only person you can change is yourself. You can inspire growth, and you inspire growth through accepting who your partner is as a person, not every behavior, but who they are as a person. And then the oxygen is also the right amount of time together and time apart. So figuring that out, and Fired Up gives you the formula for all of this and the exercises to do it. The appendix is filled with exercises that help couples sort of go through this. Fuel is, so that I don't talk at your listeners and like they're all sleeping. Fuel is the communication, the safety, and the security in your relationship that feeds it, that keeps it healthy, feeling emotionally safe, feeling secure that if you screw up, your partner's not going to walk out the door. What does your relationship need to feel safe and secure emotionally? And what are the communication strategies? How do I listen to you in a way that makes you feel heard? How do I talk in a way that doesn't irritate your vulnerabilities and make you feel heard or unseen or whatever? How do we do this in a way that supports each other? How do we apologize for our fuck ups? All of that sort of stuff. And it teaches all of that. And then ignition is the spark. That's the mystery, the fun, the play, the sexy, the romantic that we all need to light the fire and keep the fire lit. So that's what Fired Up is about. It's the system, that I've developed out of my trainings as a PACT therapist, which is Stan Tatkin's model of therapy. I've developed a program that I think really helps, and I've seen really help couples create the healthiest relationship possible.
I love all of that, but when I meet people and I interview people and I can tell that they love what they do, and you're one of those people.
Yes,
because when
I'm passionate about
you're
it.
so passionate about it, and I think what you do is so great because you're helping people and reconnecting couples that need it. At the end of the day, if you're fortunate enough to be with a partner that you truly love, it's the best thing in the world. But we all need work.
It is.
You were saying, I'm always trying to change my husband. He's always trying to change me. That's what we go through on a daily basis. And, what is it? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We just are so different as men and women, or if you're in a same sex couple, you have differences. We're all different people. So I just think it's so important. I can't wait to read it. I haven't read it yet, so I'll be hitting up Beth for a copy.
Yes.
But can you hold it up for my YouTube? Do you have a copy yet? Or did I hit?
I have the advanced review copy. The box of the official books are waiting for me in Seattle. So this is Fired Up.
Okay, so Fire It Up listeners will be available in January. What's the exact date?
So it's January 7th, but they can pre-order it now. If I don't know when this is coming out, it's available on Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and on bookshop.org. And if they're in Seattle, there is a book release party happening, and that's on my social media and on my website.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to ask you. So where can people find you?
So they can find me, they can find all the links to pre-order the book on either of my websites, my therapy website, which is carolynsharp.com, or on my retreat and coaching website, which is secureconnectionsretreats.com. And then I'm Secure Connections Coach on TikTok and Secure Connections Coaching on Instagram, and Carolyn Sharp on Facebook.
Okay, I'm going to be following you after this. Carolyn, it was so wonderful meeting you today. I love this conversation. It's just like, I love when I can walk away from a podcast. And when I'm starting the podcast, I was telling you, just kind of like a hot mess morning. And I walk away and I feel like happy and fulfilled, and just meeting you and how wonderful you are. It just really made my whole day. So thank you again for that.
Oh, well, me too. Such a fun conversation. And like I said before we started, I feel like we're soul sisters already, just
100%.
sort of what you're passionate about And, here's the secret, I'm really hoping to change the whole world. I mean, small goals, because I think everything wrong in the US and around the world is a problem of relationships, of not really listening, hearing, being curious about other people. I think if we learned how to talk to each other and listen to each other better, the world would be better. But where does that start? Starts at home.
Yeah, I love that you say that. And I love when you talked about the judgment piece. Less judgment. Let's talk to each other. There's things we can fix. And we can, if we just talk to each other and we had less judgment, like you said, I think we'd be in a lot better of a place. In closing, everyone, I know it's the holidays. I've been talking a lot about this. If you're going through a loss, or you're dealing with a divorce, or you're dealing with divorces, loss, you're dealing with a hard thing right now, just know it's one day. I keep saying this all the time. If you celebrate Christmas, it's one day. If you're celebrating different holidays, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. If it's Christmas you're celebrating and you're dreading that day, one day, the next day is a whole new day. Do some online shopping, watch some TV, do something to get your mind off of it. But I just want you to know that this first holiday, if you just lost somebody, you're going to be okay. It's baby steps. It's little by little. If you're feeling lonely, pick up a phone, talk to somebody. There's always somebody out there. If you don't have anybody, get yourself in therapy. There's schools, I say this all the time, that the therapists have to do their hours. Reach out to a local college, and there's ways to get yourself help. I just want to reiterate that. So in closing, keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Thanks, Carolyn.
Amen. Thank you.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.